Hello and welcome back to the Argyle CIO Leadership Forum. My name is Vicki Lynn Brunskill with Argyle. It's great to have everyone joining us today. I have some important information to share with you, and then I'm going to turn the floor over to our esteemed thought leadership speaker. Just a couple of notes. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsor's virtual booth at any time during today's event and for the following week. And our partners are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience today. At any time during today's event, you can visit those booths from the main agenda page, and they include complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. To ask questions throughout this session and all sessions, you simply type into the Q&A chat, and we will address your questions at the end of the session. And now, without further ado, I would like to introduce Eric Helmer, Chief Technology Officer at Rimini Street. We are so excited to have Eric with us for his thought leadership presentation titled Resilient IT Roadmap, Optimize, Evolve, and Transform. Welcome, Eric. Over to you.
Hi, thank you, Vicki. Appreciate that. And hello, and thanks everyone for joining me today. Today, we are going to be talking about building a roadmap for a resilient IT enterprise, which is so important in today's backdrop. And I'm going to kind of go through the reason why that's so important, talk about some themes of resiliency, and talk about some action plans that you can do in your company to start on a journey of a resilient, agile IT enterprise. Now, for those that may not be familiar with Rimini Street, so Rimini Street was funded in 2005, and we set out to solve a very important problem that companies are facing still today. And that is with enterprise software companies, ERP type companies, think Oracle, think SAP, Microsoft, IBM, and so on. That these companies charge a massive amount of money every year for their annual maintenance and support. And it's a huge line item in the cost and budget for IT enterprises today to pay that annual maintenance. And the support in general for these vendors are really not all that great, right? They're very slow to provide support. They don't really have the engineers. You're in constant needing of escalation or doing it yourself. So the spend is being questioned of the value that people are getting returned on that. So we set out to solve that problem. And so our customers no longer renew their annual support and maintenance contracts with these companies. And we provide a much better support model in replacement of that. And so we have engineers that actually log directly into your systems and fix particular problems for you. Our average response time for high escalate or for high priority tickets is 90 seconds. Where you have an engineer on the phone in your systems, logging in, fixing problems directly with you. Plus, we do a lot more than the vendors do, like support customizations and automations and tax and legal and regulatory updates and performance questions and how-to questions and all those things that the vendors would never really touch. Since 2005, we've grown to be about 2,000 employees. We have over 5,000 signed customers. We have an average customer satisfaction rate of 4.9 out of 5, which is unheard of in the support industry. We have 29 offices in 21 countries, supporting clients in over 150 companies. And we are a public company traded on NASDAQ. Now, over the years, we've grown our portfolio of services to be that vendor replacement support now into full outsourced and managed services. So people now can just completely turn over the entire ERP enterprise to us, and we fully manage it day to day from a managed services perspective. We also offer a lot of security solutions that are specifically targeted to secure the enterprise of the ERP. So for Oracle, you can think EBS, JD Edwards, Siebel, PeopleSoft, those sorts of things. On the SAP side, you can think of SAP ECC or S/4HANA and things like that, right? And then we do some interoperability and connectivity solutions, and as well, of course, full suite of professional services and consulting that we do. So the whole portfolio is completely centered around specialties in the ERP, middleware databases that are all associated with those ERP platforms. So let's talk about the situation that we're in here right now. And as the CTO of Rimini Street, my job is I travel all over the world to different offices to talk to customers, to talk to people who are in this situation of ERP, and try to keep abreast of what's happening in the industry, what's happening with the customers, what are the vendors up to, where are we in this journey of what's next, what does next gen look like in this world of enterprise IT. And in summary, really what I'm seeing is that people are concerned because the world right now is completely changing and completely unpredictable. But at the same time, we need to have this maniacal focus on achieving both profitability and growth. Usually you can only achieve one of those without the other, but we're getting squeezed now to really achieve both of those at the same time. And at the same time, we're getting these vendors who are giving us high pressure to convince us to re-implement on their subscription-based software platforms and kind of abandon our on-premise perpetual licenses today. So we're trying to reconcile how to deal with all that at the same time, because at the same time, we need to have this whole idea of agility and resiliency in our IT enterprise, right? We need to be able to switch things out, change our minds, change things in a very quick and agile way. And at the same time, we need to also free up budget to invest in a lot of the things that I hear that people really want to focus on is improving the customer experience and, of course, cybersecurity budgets. And we want to be able to leverage the things that we have today and not have to reinvent the wheel or re-implement. And we're afraid of lock-in, right? So we've got to kind of balance all of those things. And the reason why this is so important is because everything is changing in the world today with the geopolitical issues that we're having with the wars and the conflicts and the pandemics and sanctions that are happening right now, the business challenges that we're in with cybersecurity nightmare that we're in, limited budgets, labor shortages, supply chain issues, and then of course the financial uncertainty that's happening with the rising interest rates, inflations, this whole idea of maybe recession or not, we don't know. So all of these things, we're not really a stranger to any one of these things, but the uniqueness of our situation is that all of these things are happening all at the same time right now. So what that's happening is putting businesses into this defensive nature. So yes, we want profitability and growth, but really the focus going into this year is protecting profitability and growth in these uncertain times. So that's why resiliency is key. So we have to brace for impact. We have to expect the worst. We've got to prepare for the worst so that if a market condition comes and makes us change a particular piece of our business, we want to be able to have a modular based approach so that we can just change the thing that is being affected without having to completely rip out the entire enterprise and start over because one aspect of the business or one aspect of IT has changed. So there's a modularity type of thing, there's a swappability thing, there's an agile thing, there's this modular type of approach to businesses, to technology, to vendors, so that we'll be able to have that ability to change things. So the idea here is to be able, when we get a flat tire on the car, we can just change the tire on that car and not have to abandon the entire car altogether and go get a brand new car just because the tire got flat, right? Okay, so in this world then, how do we deal with all of this enterprise IT in this backdrop of this situation that we're in? How do we stay resilient when we have these big monolithic vendors that are the back end of our systems? And how do we reconcile all that? So the first thing I want to do is I want to start with some themes that we have when it comes to resiliency. And the first thing is that we have to understand how the vendors are trying to lock us in, and we have to understand a defensive play for that. We want to be able to avoid that because, of course, lock-in is the opposite of resiliency, right? We also have to make sure that as we're trying to look at achieving business objectives, that we look at all the options that are on the table, right? Outside of maybe our monolithic ERP vendors, because there's so many options that we have out there today. And we want to have a laser focus on the return on investment, which is so important today. So the reason why this is really important today is because in general, I think customers they're on this crossroads that they kind of have to pick which path that they want to go on from the very beginning. And the first path really is what I call the vendor-driven roadmap, which means just follow whatever the vendor is telling you to do. It might be the easy button to do it, but How does that play into this whole idea of resiliency? So if you look at companies like Oracle and SAP, of course, they're applying high pressure for companies to abandon their on-premise perpetual license models today and throw that away and then re-implement everything into their subscription-based software as a service model, right? So you're moving from the ownership of that software now to be a rented tenant into their cloud platforms, right? So people with these limited budgets and this whole idea of this lock-in as you kind of go into this kind of cloud model that you can't really leave when you already have a very nice working system today that you're generally happy with, does that make sense? Does that spend make sense to spend multi-million dollars, multi-years to move from your perpetual ownership to a rented model to have very similar or even less functionality in what you started with 2 years ago, right? So that's very difficult to understand how that, and you're innovating at the speed of that one monolithic vendor, right? And sometimes those vendors are kind of are slow to innovate, and it doesn't meet the speed of the business, and you just kind of get whatever new releases that they have that you never really asked for or even wanted, so you have to kind of innovate on what they provide. I think other customers now, really what they're looking at is what we're calling the business-driven roadmap. And that is for the business to pick and choose the best fit software, technology, solutions, and vendors that's going to give them the best business return and solve the best business outcomes in the most cost-effective way. So choosing the right vendor for HR, right vendor for whatever else that they might need, that's going to give them those business outcomes with the path of least resistance in the most cost-effective way. So these are the ones that are kind of questioning we are an Oracle shop, period. We're an SAP shop, period. And really looking at form-fit solutions and vendors that are going to give those the best business outcomes at the speed that they need, at the cost that they're willing to pay. Okay, so Gartner calls this the composable business, and there's really three kind of guiding principles to that, and that is the composable business architecture, which is how you create your business through kind of fusion teams, so you're able to kind of replace teams as needed when market conditions happen. The composable technology, which means you're using the best fit technology to solve those business objectives in the most cost-effective way. And of course, the right mix of vendors, choosing the right vendor that gives you the right outcomes with the right service level agreements with the right price, right? So there's kind of those three guiding principles that are needed for that. And then how that changes to enterprise software is looking at all the enterprise is with all these particular layers, knowing that you can change each one of these layers as needed. So it's a sum of all of these individual parts, but you can change these and extend on that, build a core and extend as needed individual technologies that gives the outcomes that are needed, right? So as opposed to just looking at this as just one field replaceable unit, it's something that you can actually change and manipulate certain things as needed along the way. Okay, so in order to understand why this is so important now, we have to kind of go back in history. If you look at when ERP started, right, 30 years ago, right, there wasn't really a lot of vendors that were out there. It was a very simple landscape. If you wanted to outsource your application managed services or your database managed services, there wasn't really a lot of options. What was there? Maybe IBM and Accenture that you could always take all that stuff and give it to. Your support and your software always had to come from the vendor. And what was out there from an infrastructure? There's Dell, Compaq, IBM, Sun Microsystems. Is probably about it, right? So at that point, it became a very competitive landscape with a few vendors, and it was a race to a bottom. It was hardcore RFP, and if Compaq gave you problems and issues, you just said the word ERP, or I'm sorry, you just said the word IBM, and you would get kind of whatever that you wanted, right? So it's a very competitive landscape, and the advantage was always with the customer. But if we fast forward to where we are today, if you look at programs like SAP Rise or Oracle Fusion and things like that, the ERP vendors are now trying to bring your entire stack into one particular contract under this idea, well, it's a single hand to shake, single throat to choke for your entire enterprise. So your application managed services by the vendor, the database managed services baked into the contract, your your support contract baked in, your software licenses, converting it from your perpetual ownership now to a subscription-based model, all the way through and even including infrastructure today, right? So now all of this stuff is baked into the one 10-year-long contract, which Gartner is raising the red flag, and we're raising the red flag saying, hey, this is the opposite of agility. This is the opposite of resiliency, because now the whole car is the field replaceable unit here. You can't manipulate any one of these things without scorched earthing the entire enterprise and completely starting over, and you're being locked into these long-term contracts. So this is the situation why resiliency is so key right now, because of the landscape that we're in with the vendor pressures. So what we're suggesting and what Gartner is suggesting is pick the right vendor to give you the right vendor outcomes in such a way that you can fire that vendor if you don't like what they're doing, and you can replace them with another vendor without having to rip out the entire enterprise in order to do that. So find your specialized AMS partner, a managed services partner, find a specialized database, find the right support provider that would be able to do that. And from an infrastructure perspective, shoot, there's Amazon, Azure, Google Cloud. There's all sorts of different options that we can do that with now today. So the idea is pick that right vendor. There's no one vendor that's all things to everybody, right? And they're probably outsourcing a lot of the stuff that's not their core competency anyways. So, and you're paying margin upon margin, right? So go directly to the right provider that's going to give you the service levels at the cost you're willing to pay. So the first thing that we want to be able to talk about is when we're optimizing, and this decision tree is very, very simple, but it makes a very valid point that when we find a business requirement that we have today that we want to be able to solve, that I think a lot of people think that they have to go out and find a new solution in order to solve that problem. When we have some of the most advanced enterprise software that we have today in things like Oracle and SAP, it is some of the most advanced software ever written, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of lines of code that is designed to be customizable and configured for your liking. So smart organizations today, when they have a new business requirement, looks at the systems that they have today to see if it can be done in the existing systems today, before just automatically assuming that they have to go outside the system. And if it can be done in the existing system, why not do that and leverage the assets that you already have, as opposed to now bringing in another system? Now, if it can't be done in the existing system today, then we should extend that, your core system that you have today, with a solution that extends on top of it. Not replace the whole thing, but just extends, and extends only to reach the functionality of that business requirement that you need. And that's it. You're only doing the resilient piece, and you're doing it in the most cost-effective way by only getting that new feature or functionality that you need, not ripping everything out because you need that one thing, right? So for example, if you have a HR in your existing system is not working out for you, you have something happens in the market, or you have to have some new business requirement where that module is not working for you in your Oracle or SAP system. What you can do then is cease to use the HR module within that ERP, and then extend HR into something else like Workday or ADP or something like that, right? Not having to replace the entire ERP with the 20 other modules that you have that are working just fine, just because you have that one HR business requirement. You can just simply extend that system into something that is incremental, that is going to be able to solve that problem for you in the path of least resistance. So I want to give you just a quick example of what this means. This is an SAP example of a medium-sized company who has the core modules of SAP. This is ECC, if you're familiar. So they have the materials management modules, they have the finance modules, sales and distribution, and production planning, which are some of the most common, right? They now want to start expanding the company, grow a little bit bigger, where they want to start now bringing in an HR module into the fold, into the ERP fold. They want to start using SAP for CRM. They want to start bringing in warehouse management into their ERP. So they called SAP and they said, hey, how can we go ahead and add these modules? Well, SAP told them, well, in order for you to do this, the first thing you have to do is migrate off of ECC re-implement all that stuff into the RISE program on the S4 HANA. So bring over those 4 modules, so re-implement materials management, FICO, sales and distribution, production planning, and then we'll add on the HR, CRM, and warehouse management module to that mix, and then you can configure and build those out. So this was, multi-year long project to be able to do something like that. And we looked at, and they did an ROI analysis of that. They've realized it's going to be a bit over $13 million, but they did an ROI analysis of being a 200% ROI over the course of 7 years. So not too bad, pretty expensive, long. But then they called us and we started taking a look and said, well, let's see what your needs are for HR, CRM, and warehouse management. And we looked at the business requirements that needed for that. And we realized that Workday would work just great for them for HR, and Salesforce.com would work really good for their customer management, and Manhattan would work really, really well for their warehouse management. So instead of re-implementing all of those 4 modules just to get those 3 extra modules, instead we showed them how they could just only implement those 3 things for HR, CRM, and warehouse management. And we showed them a project that would only cost $5 million and would have an ROI of 680%. So again, implement, don't re-implement, right? Extend, don't re-platform. Just because you have incremental needs, there's ways of looking at all the different options that we have available, but you have to lead with ROI. ROI is the key to see at what year do you get the payback, what percentage return do you get from all of this, and that has to be paramount, especially today when you've got to go into a board of directors and ask for a massive amount of money. They want to know how this is going to actually move the needle for the business. So now let's talk about actions. We talked about themes. Now let's talk about actions, and these actions for resiliency. And that is, it's going to start by categorizing the value of the systems that we have today. And once we categorize, we can start focusing resources on the things that return the highest value, and we minimize the resources that we're going to be spending on the commodity-based systems. So let me tell you what I mean by that. So the first thing to do on this journey is to start looking at your entire landscape of the applications you have across your entire enterprise. And you really put them all into 3 different buckets. The first one, the first major bucket is, what are the systems of record? The non-differentiating, non-innovating systems that you have, back office things that aren't moving the needle, that's not setting you aside from your competitors, that aren't out there achieving profitability and growth, taking market share from competitor, really reducing costs or anything like that. It's just back office systems. I mean, they're mandatory, they're mission critical, but these aren't really the systems that are moving the needle for the company. So we call them systems, transactional systems, or systems of records, right? So these are ERP platforms. These are back-end database things. These are shared services types of things. So the idea is to understand, these are what we want to understand is just standard industrial-based things that are just back office things. The next bucket that we want to, the kind of category buckets are looking at systems that we would categorize as a system of differentiation that is differentiating us from our competitors, and systems of innovation that is systems that are new, that we're trying to lead the industry with, maybe markets we're trying to create, that is going to be systems of innovation, right? So by looking at these buckets, that's how we can figure out where we want to spend our time and focus of our resources. So if you look at the attributes of systems of record, system of differentiation, system of innovations, this is how you can kind of define each one of those things. So a business process of a system of record is really just mostly a commodity. They're mostly stable. They're going to run for 10, 15, 20 years. You don't really spend much time on them for planning. Maybe every 7 years you might take a look at it. They're standard. It's an integrated kind of stable system. As you start looking at a system of differentiation, this is where it's highly configurable, very customizable, right? The lifespan of these things may only be 2 to 5 years before you're kind of going on to the next thing, because usually after 5 years, it's no longer differentiating because now everybody's doing it, right? So it's agile, it's flexible types of system. When you start talking about innovation, now this is almost wild west, right? It's completely experimental. It's rapid. It's very frequent. You might bring on a technology for a year and then completely abandon it and go on to something else. It's very disruptive. So this is very once you get your entire enterprise to look at systems like this, now you can get everybody, you can get the business aligned with this idea, you can get your procurement departments aligned with this idea, and you can start figuring out where you want to focus. After you categorize all these systems, the next thing you want to do is find out where you're spending the time on all these things. And I think what you'll find is what a lot of our customers are finding is that they're spending 90% of their time on the systems of record and only 10% of their time on the systems of differentiation and innovation, right? So you want to put together a project, a plan to start minimizing the resources and time that you're spending on those systems of record so that you can start focusing your environment on the things that actually move the needle for the company. This is an example of kind of what that happens. So the idea is outsource these systems of record, get them off your plate, start focusing resources on the things that really move the needle. Okay, so I think that's about it. Here's just kind of a summary of things that you're going to want to take in consideration when you're looking to optimize and evolve. And right now, Vicki, I think we'll take it over for any kind of questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Eric. We have some questions that have come in from the audience.
Okay.
The first question is, what is the best way to start a roadmap analysis if you have never done it before?
Yeah, so that's great. Sometimes it's hard to know where to really get started. I tell you where a perfect way to get started outside of categorizing the systems, like I said, is to start with the business objectives. And kind of really understand where the business wants to go next over the next 3 to 5 years, and create a document of requirements of what things that you want to do. What SLAs within your business do you want to affect? What KPIs do you want to affect? You want to move production 10% faster. You want to decrease costs in this particular area, make it actionable, right? Then once you have those business requirements, then you can apply the technology that is going to be best form fit to solve those individual objectives, right? So we're changing from this kind of traditional idea of choosing the technology first and then configuring it to meet our needs, to looking at what our needs are first and then right sizing and right fitting the exact technology that's going to solve that incremental objective that we need in the most cost-effective way with the path of least resistance.
Perfect. Thank you for that. And then another question that came in is SAP is telling us that they'll stop supporting ECC in 2027. I hear what you're saying about not doing unnecessary upgrades, but aren't we going to be forced to?
Yeah, well, that's really the main thing is that date. But to be honest, that's the beauty of the Rimini Street and third-party support model. That date doesn't apply to third-party support customers. That only applies if you are a support customer for SAP. So when SAP says we're not going to support you past that date, then for those that don't want to go through an unnecessary cloud migration or an upgrade that they don't want to do, then just go to a company that will support you, right? So that limitation is only with the vendors. So you come to a company like Rimini Street, then we do all the support for you. You don't have that date. You can upgrade or move if or when you want to, but you can do it on your timeline and not theirs.
Thank you. Okay, another question that came is, do you help companies with ROI analysis and scenario modeling as a service?
Yeah, we sure do. As a matter of fact, what I showed here a little bit ago was an exact example of that. So you have to look at all the different options and scenarios, right? So in this case, they needed to solve an HR problem, a CRM problem, and a warehouse management problem. So we looked at looking at SAP for that. We looked at other different options for that. And you have to look at all the different scenarios. And at the end of the day, you see a $5 million project, a $13 million project, and with different completely ROIs, but the same exact business objectives were attained, right? The same business outcome was achieved, but you saw the complete difference between one path versus another. So in order to go to board of directors today and get funding for budgets and projects, you have to do this level of analysis and show that you've looked at every single option. And we provide that as a service to answer your question, yes.
All right, we have about 2 minutes left, so I'm going to give you one more question, but it might be a big one. What do you see as the biggest mistake IT leaders make when crafting and managing an enterprise software roadmap?
Yeah, so I think probably the main thing here is there's still a lot of loyalty and perceptions with we are an SAP shop or we are an Oracle shop, and they start with that premise on everything. And then they try to fit that monolithic thing into and how they're going to fit into their business, number one. Number two, I think people make the mistake of upgrading equals modernization, or moving to the vendor's cloud equals modernization. And that, or you were forced to have to go to the cloud for that. That's probably the biggest mistake. You really need to come back and look at what the alternatives are for everything, and take the power back for your business driven roadmap and do the things that you want to do using the technology that you want to do with the timeline that you want to do. So it's not really looking at all of your options and just assuming that you have to go down a path under this whole idea of what modernization means.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Thank you, Eric, for that. That was a very practical and thoughtful presentation, and we appreciate it. I also want to thank everyone else for joining us today. This session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. And thank you again, Eric.
Thank you.